Okay, so my name is Chizuba, and my presentation today is on helping you all become facilitators of inclusive community development in your communities or in your areas of influence, so inclusive being justice as well. So I'm sure everyone has been looking at the news. So what are some of the themes, what are some of the top social issues that you have noticed recently?
Millennials are the worst generation.
Okay.
Trump in general.
Okay, Trump.
I've been noticing a lot more missing Indigenous women.
Exactly.
War in the Middle East.
We. So the question, I think, for us and for every generation, I hope, is being able to figure out what must we do to be able to change these things. And so the question I have for you all, why do you think these issues continues to persist? So every time there's this big conference, you hear about the Millennium Development Goals, and now there's the Sustainable Development Goals, and still, it feels like we're not really moving forward. So what, do you guys have ideas on why you think, you know, there's a lot of movement, but it looks like we're not really moving anywhere? Any thoughts?
I think the higher ups are a lot less flexible than the grassroots levels.
So there's a disconnection between the top and the bottom, right? Okay.
I have a very misanthropic view of humans. They're fundamental, like that. There's too much fundamental greed,
Right.
and desire for power instead of community and connection, and those are the things that would actually make those changes.
Right. So it feels like power is centered around a few people. So very perhaps individual centered, very economic centered. And I think all of those are right. And it's connected to, I guess, the core ideas of perhaps my own understanding of what I think is at the core of some of these connections. So here I'm saying that in every society where you find these kinds of issues, from the Trumps arising to, you know, having, you know, indigenous women ongoing way in a supposedly first world country being missing and no one cares and no one knows how to find them, I'm arguing that there is often that all of these issues indicate that there's a disconnection between democratic ideals in general, as a theory. There's a disconnect between democratic ideals of, you know, including everyone, of what justice means, of what democracy means, which is really about bringing everyone together, really about humanizing ourselves, really about rejuvenating society. So there's a disconnection between these ideals and the vision people have for themselves. The people living, they have some idea of what they think is important to them. But somehow, I'm saying there's a disconnection between democratic ideals, the vision of society people have, the policies and the political economy. So here as well, the democratic ideals don't necessarily match up with the policies we see that people are bound by, doesn't necessarily match up with the vision of society that people have for themselves and the lived reality. So with the Trump example, for example, no one ever really imagined that Trump could become president. You know, we thought we lived in a post-racial world, you know, Obama is president and all of those things. So clearly, you know, the so-called democratic ideals and the policies and the politics in America and in the world is clearly very disconnected from what people are feeling and living every day, right? So this brings me to what my core objective here is today. So I'm hoping that at the end of my presentation today, everyone would have a better sense of what it would mean and what it looks like and what it feels like to actually start to think of ourselves as facilitators of inclusive development, a more social justice oriented approach to being a citizen, to enabling positive development in our communities. And I think at the core of that, in doing that, I think we always must be searching to make sure we have an equilibrium between these four pillars that I'm suggesting are the core of social movement. So So here, my learning objective here is to be able to get us to be able to suggest a conceptual framework that would enable us to become facilitators of justice, of inclusion in our communities. So here, so when I think of justice and inclusion, what does that mean to you all? Like, what does justice, what does a more inclusive society look like to you all? Yeah?
Opportunities for equitable participation.
Opportunities for equitable participation.
I think this is a more or less wordy way of doing it, but saying everyone has an important role in society. I think
Okay.
that's kind of what you were getting at too.
Yeah, so everyone is valued.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Any other thoughts?
I think equality between people, so no like discrimination or different like rights or privileges between people depending on race or orientation.
Right. So difference is also honored, like our diverse differences
Yeah.
are honored. Okay. So, and I think these are all right, and I think these are very important foundations in any society. So, and I would, like you would see here, a guy called Claude Ake is someone that I found very inspiring and helpful in being able to think about how to move communities together that have histories that are often sidelined. So we obviously live in a colonial world and a colonizing world where the Eurocentric knowledge systems is what is being privileged and other knowledges are being sidelined. So with people like Claude Ake, and his work has focused more on Africa, and he talks about in thinking about what a more inclusive and a more equitable world could look like, or a more equitable Africa would look like. He says that we need to have a vision of democracy that is different from a liberal democracy, that emphasizes concrete economic and social rights, rather than abstract political rights, such as I'm going to vote. It will also insist on the democratization of economic opportunities, which is everything you all have talked about, that this has to be about opportunities for everyone and material benefits. It also has to deal with the social betterment of the people and have a strong welfare system. And then he says it would have to be effectively participative, and it will have to draw on African traditions, but you can replace this with any other thing. So wherever there are groups of people, their traditions, their history should be reflective of the political and policy systems that they are bound in. And that those traditions and histories must adapt to the democracy, to the culture and the historic experience of those people. So what we're saying here is that in terms of thinking about this ideal society that we've narrated here, so those ideal societies must be, in terms of the object of this society, you must think about, what is the history that we're doing? What is the foundation that these societies stand on? So for these societies to be inclusive, they have to be anchored around the history, the anti-colonial history of these communities. They have to be anchored around the experience, the diverse experiences of people. It has to be their idea. And the diverse people that make up these communities must also be included in the very foundation of these societies. And then when you now use that as a basis to think about the economic transformation of the community, so you see it's the ideas of the people that inform the economics, and then in terms of being able to get what they want, it's also the people at the center. So Claude Ake goes on to talk more about the principles of development, and I think this is an important framework, that if, imagine, any of us were called in as a consultant to come help a community, or come help America for that matter. What are we going to do? How do you go in there and actually try to fix things? So Claude Ake argues that the first principle we must keep in mind is that people must be the agents of development. And what does it mean to be the agents of development? Technically, the people have to be the ones at the front. It's not about us, it's about the people. And so being about the people, you must look for their voices. So, and I think the first thing actually in trying to solve any problem is coming up with a plan. So I think we imagine that our first goal is to come up with what is the plan for how things need to change. So to come up with that plan, it's the people's voices. We need to talk to the people. We need to get the people to talk. we must also activate the anti-colonial history of the place. So in asking questions, we must ask questions that validates the fact that people were existing there before, you know, the settlers came to America, before settlers came to Canada, for example. So that means we must ask different questions. We don't just ask, oh, you know, if you want to ask if people are, you know, how the education system is, you don't just ask, oh, are you good in math and English? Perhaps that's a good thing, but math and English can't necessarily be the only measure of success for people, and we must question why that is the only measure of success. So in thinking about the anti-colonial history of the place, we think about their heritage, we think about, you know, what the ancestors went through and how that needs to be corrected through the current generation. And then we also retrieve indigenous knowledge systems. So indigenous knowledge systems is about political, it is a, you know, if we think about the fact that there were people existing in a certain land before other people came, it must also mean that these people had an economic system going on for them. They had a political system going on for them. They had an education system going on for them. So in trying to come up with a more inclusive and sustainable framework and more sustainable plan, we must activate these things in our conversations with the people. So then this would mean the people will have to start telling you stories about their lives, telling you about how things were done and all of that. And then for the next step for him with Claude Ake, he says, in addition to people being the agents of development, they must also be the means through which development happens. So now the people have told us, you know, about their stories, they've told us about what is going on in the community, they've told us about what difference, what change looks like for them. We must now ensure that they are the ones being involved in the process of actually doing the groundwork. So how does the issues they've identified at the first stage, how should it transfer and translate into policy? We must ensure the people are the ones that get to go to talk to the, you know, to the politicians, they're the ones that get to go talk to the researchers, they're the ones, because in the process they are developing social capital that will be useful to them. So here in this picture, this is like a nice brainstorming picture where community talks, and if they have to get anything done, they're the ones doing it, not us. And really, you're just facilitating and enabling a different way of doing things. And then the last, and I think in this, yes, and so as facilitators, again, we have to continuously keep in mind that our goal, as we ask these questions, is to be looking at where are the areas where these disconnections between the pillars of social living is happening. Because I think in the ideal sense, these things will be synchronized. Policies will mirror the diverse histories of people. The lived reality would also mirror the democratic ideals people are living in. I mean, it doesn't mean things will be static and everything will be perfect at once, but we definitely want an environment in which these pillars continuously self-correct each other. So as a facilitator, your job is to be looking for where are the opportunities for these disconnections to be corrected. What are the opportunities in the history people are telling you? And then Claude Ake says lastly, the last step really is that after you create this fantastic facilitation process, fantastic plan on how things should change, ideally the main beneficiaries of this transformed plan are the people. So you see, for example, if I use Africa and a lot of the volunteer projects that happen in Africa, you find that many people, many kids from the West will go to Africa to save Africans, and after they set up these schools based on their idea of what they think Africans need, and after they leave, the school dies. But the people that came from the West have now updated their resume. So they are actually the beneficiaries of this plan, not the people on the ground. So if it's the other way around, where people on the ground, they have come up with what they want, they've been involved in the process of, you know, trying to get it, and when they get it, they are going to be the ends of the development, right? So we can now start to wrap up the class. So in my initial conversation, we've talked about how you facilitate an approach towards development that, you know, pursues justice. And as you see, based on what I've said, you can imagine this is a more difficult process. It's quite more time-consuming because you have to spend time talking to people, listening to people. So it's more targeted towards long-term solutions as opposed to short-term solutions. like quick fixes. Oh, I'm just going to throw money at people. Or I'm just going to, the Bronx in the States, there's lots of gangs there. We just send more police force there, as opposed to actually trying to understand what is going on. So also our approach towards inclusion or towards democratic development is actually ask questions that are at the core of the community. So it's directed at the root causes of injustice, as opposed to directed at the symptoms of the manifestation of issues. And then I think in the long run, as facilitators of inclusive social change, our goal should be to change institutional structures so that institutional structures are more reflective of the diverse needs of the people and are reflective of the diverse historical experiences of people. Okay, so I think we already touched on this. And then, yeah, that's the end.